Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. How to teach language arts without a boxed curriculum, also known as a Charlotte Mason approach for dummies. My expertise is using the Charlotte Mason or Living Books approach. We had a relaxed Charlotte Mason approach in our house. Other families were more detailed or firm in their planning. There is no one way to do Charlotte Mason, but you recognize the principles in a variety of implementations as you get to know other families. And this is how I'm speaking today. I don't intend to review or compare other methods. If you need more explanations for options, keep researching other homeschooling resources. I will be recommending resource books for you. They will be your manuals over the years. Later in the podcast, I will switch to a video to show you examples from our children when they were young. The idea for this podcast came about because a young homeschooling mum asked me what language arts curriculum I'd recommend now her daughter is reading more confidently. I then realized what I had recorded earlier in other podcasts was insufficient, and more details with examples and ideas were needed. Today is more about Charlotte Mason with younger children rather than older ones. It is just as applicable for older students, but it looks a little different. That guide is for another day. First of all, let's define what language arts are. From a couple of Charlotte Mason websites, 2 quotes for you. 1. Art is a way of communicating an idea, whether it is done through music, paint, sculpture, or dance. The goal of art is to communicate an idea. Now add the word language to that concept. The goal of language arts is to be able to use a language proficiently in order to communicate an idea. And the second quote, language arts skills are learned through narration, which consists of the child telling back a story, first orally and later in written form. Copywork, or the transcribing of a well-written piece of literature, and dictation of passages from their books. Memorization was used by Charlotte Mason, not so much to assimilate facts, but to give children material to meditate or chew on. So her students memorized scripture and poetry. On to the questions. 1. How do you know when you've done enough, or if it is age appropriate? I don't think that's the right question. Putting it another way, this will be answered as I go on. You know what your child is capable of. If the book is too hard or too easy, you're going to know soon. Your reference books with recommendations should already be organized with suggested grades and ages. It is a guide. If your child has reading challenges, you'll aim under and progress as she can. If she's an avid reader, let her read on above her age. Keep an eye on content. Her ability versus maturity may not be balanced. I recommend short lessons of 10 to 30 minutes, depending on age. Number 2. What are the advantages versus disadvantages of a boxed curriculum? Let me answer it this way. If you want to be told exactly what, how, and when, then perhaps a boxed curriculum is for you. For me, that was a disadvantage because it wasn't the way I wanted to homeschool. It may be applicable in the early years of homeschooling when you might be lacking in confidence. That was our experience. We used ACE in our first year, moved on in the second, using texts such as learning language arts through literature. It was still telling me what to do, although it showed me how. I joined a Charlotte Mason support group with long-term homeschool mums attending. It started to become a combination of the previous text and learning to free range with literature, then leading on to complete freedom with living books and confidence in Charlotte Mason. And once our older two children had finished school, my confidence grew because it worked. If I'd been blessed with mentoring from the beginning, this would have been a quicker, less stressed and less expensive route. Occasionally, I would dip into some how-to books to see if I was missing anything, but I only needed some encouragement and motivation. Sometimes there was a fresh idea, but nothing new, because Charlotte Mason had already covered it. Buying good literature or living books is an investment. These are your curricula, and rather than only being useful until the end of the school term or when they're filled in, these last over your homeschooling years and continue into the decades for rereading and grandchildren. Putting it another way, the literature book is the curriculum. The obvious advantage of not using a boxed curriculum is you design, plan, and pivot your homeschooling according to your children's strengths and weaknesses and what you know they need, and frankly, what you need. I hope you can see the advantages and disadvantages. In podcast 64, Anne tells us how her mother would give her books to read. Go back and listen to that and see the ease by which that happened. Number 3. What does a lesson plan look like? However, you still need to plan. Have your goals and ideas, but be flexible. You'll need a book list to refer to and pre-order from the library or buy for your home library. Start with the assigned literature book. Depending on age, expect a certain time for reading or a number of pages or a chapter. If she is pre-phonics, that will be what you concentrate on. Read to her until she can move on to independent reading. We would have a personal literature book and the read aloud everyone listened to. Also, an historical literature book, rhymes or poetry, Bible or a Christian book, and for examples you'll see these in the video later on. What is in your plan? It could be a few of the following: handwriting practice or copy work, spelling, written narration, a paragraph or a few sentences depending on the age. Note for the written narration, don't insist on good handwriting or correct spelling. I would rather she got her splendid ideas or recollections down in untidy writing or incorrect spelling, rather than write less or a lesser word if she couldn't spell it. If she's not sure of a word, help her sound it out and make it a spelling word. You can also identify in advance which words the child may spell incorrectly. She can do this. Go over a few pages with her and find words to learn. Better she learns how to spell correctly by writing out several times than unlearn what was spelt wrong. What else to write? For early learners, you might be using illustration for narration instead of words. Poetry, creative writing, both impulsive and assigned, nature journals, personal journals or diaries, dictation, which is not for the very young, a book log for their personal literature books and the read-aloud books everyone listens to. The child can read aloud also to learn tone, punctuation, interpreting the drama she is reading, and how to pronounce words. Obviously, you won't do all of these every day, but work out how often is right for you and the children, and sometimes you won't actually know until you just get on and do it over the week. For a young child, age 6 to 7 or 8 to 9, I think 30 minutes in maths, games, a book or both, and 2 times reading for 20 to 30 minutes, and 3 times 15 to 20 minutes in spelling, copywork or other is sufficient. For the read aloud time, 30 minutes. These times are a guide, not an instruction. If your child is keen to read more or finishes a task sooner, there is a measure of flexibility. You are not in a classroom waiting for the bell. A nature walk, art, or other extras can still be fitted in before lunch. And that's it. The afternoon includes a rest, visits, service opportunities, sport, etc. It's your privilege to be flexible and decide what is happening. Don't worry if your plans don't go quite as planned. Treat them as a guide, not a blueprint. Sometimes one of our children would want a fill-in-the-gaps workbook for a while, so I'd get one, but it was for a little variety for her, not a permanent thing. Filling in the gaps means the child has to find the right answer, and not necessarily what she learned in the reading. That's the beauty of narration. You'll see exactly what she learned. If there's sickness or a new baby, a workbook may be helpful. You will know what is best for your family at the time. For us, we pulled back when necessary, and I lowered my expectations for a while, but I kept using good books to teach our children. It's so easy. I used to wonder if I was missing something. Number 4, what to do without a checklist. I actually think that's been covered well above. Moving from the questions I was asked to adding my own notes. Doubt is normal. When you haven't delegated your child's education, doubt and worry come and go with annoying regularity. If it's late at night, teach yourself to ignore it and deal with it in the morning. Worries and doubts always look insurmountable and convincing when you're tired. After a good night's sleep, it's amazing how much easier it is to deal with it, and how it's not as bad as you thought it was last night. Once you realize this is normal, it loses its power over you. And that's one of my best hints from today's podcast. Resource books for you. These are your manuals to refer to regularly over the years. They will equip you in your career of homeschooling. Amongst the many were my favourites: Susan Schaeffer-MacCauley's For the Children's Sake, Karen Andreola, A Charlotte Mason Companion, the original homeschooling series, which are Charlotte Mason's books, Honey for a Child's Heart by Gladys Hunt, Books Children Love by Elizabeth Wilson, and I have to say Karen Andreola's A Charlotte Mason Companion truly was my companion over the years. These books are all on our website. Find New Zealand or your country's books to replace some of the US books, since some are America focused and not useful for us. Helpful websites. Ours, of course, cominghomeinfo.com. There is also amblesideonline.org, charlottemason.com, simply charlottemason.com, and I will put those in the description box below. Don't spend any money on a curriculum until you've been homeschooling for a while. I know you'll probably ignore me. You'll have to learn that one by yourself. Yes, literature books can be expensive, especially the beautiful ones, but it's cheaper than a boxed curriculum and can be used over and over. If you have bought something you regret, sell it. You'll recoup some of your money and it won't accuse you every time you see it in the cupboard. You can do without that guilt. A child will learn naturally, but given the best type of book, she will learn optimally as well as naturally. She learnt naturally when a baby and toddler. All you had to be was sure she had stimulation and opportunity. It's the same with language arts. Get out of the child's way and let her learn through living books. You don't have to explain what she's reading unless she needs it. Many things unfamiliar to her will be picked up in context. She may figure it out as she reads or know it already. If she doesn't, she will ask. And you can encourage her to, but don't interrupt the reading process to check if she knows such and such. If asking questions turns into a discussion, follow the important opportunity it is and don't worry about what is supposed to be the next thing on your lesson plan, unless it's deliberate delaying, and you know her well enough for that. Don't let an opportunity go by. If she initiates or asks questions about important things and you're doing something, stop and listen. Don't let the chance go by, especially if they're in their tweens or teens. This moment may not come back. The laundry can wait. So can your phone and the TV. Let's move over to the video section now. Alright, I've got some books I want to show you to use as examples, and I've also got some of our youngest daughter's work from when she was quite young, and so you'll be able to see what I mean. Now, first of all, I mentioned the phonics book, so since that's chronologically where your child is going to be at once they start their reading and writing, these are from one of the sets we had. Unfortunately, out of all of the homeschooling curricula that I had bought, my phonics books was something that I never ever wanted to sell or give away, and I've lent them out over the years, and just this is the only one I've got left. So lend at your risk, I suppose is what I should say. When you are choosing books for young people, especially the ones that you're going to teach them to read out of and copy out of, you see this book here has got the A. I don't know what that's called, but that's very common amongst printers, and most books are printed with this. But for young readers, you need to find, inside the book it's different, you need to find where they've got a normal lowercase alphabet A. Also the same with the G. And that's about it, I think. Avoid using books for your children to learn out of in their early years when they have got that type of A and that squiggly G that you can see sometimes in most printing things. It's only confusing for a very young child, so wherever possible you don't want confusion. So these are my phonics books that we had. We used them a lot. Phonics books, well, in my time phonics books were an investment. They were quite expensive, but they're worth the getting. There are also worksheets that came with them, and yeah, this is an example of Janie's ones there. You see the workbooks, and you can emulate these in books yourself, or you can buy textbooks that have the dotted lines halfway through the line, and the intention is to teach your child that capital letters go right to the top and lowercase letters that have the long back or stick there also go to the top, but all others sit underneath this line. It's a very good idea to start gently but firmly instilling that writing habit in them when they're young. The older they are, when you try to undo that habit, it's really, really hard. Also a good idea for you as the mum teacher. Now this was done in August 2005, so Janie is 5.5, maybe coming up to 6. And I've written up the top here a little note for me, and that's really good reference for you for later on, because you won't remember everything that your child is up to and doing. And my note there is, Janie is trying very hard to write letters properly. So she was a little bit more advanced than in her very early years. So she's 6 actually there. And of course they always love the stickers. So that's the phonic books that I wanted to give you an example from. Now, this is the book here that I'm going to use as an example as a literature book for a very young child, as well as how we use this with a Charlotte Mason method. So that means that not only was this a reading book where the child was listened to it when you were reading it to her, maybe even trying to read some herself, and also the opportunity to use what is in there to teach as you go. So this is obviously a Chinese story, so you can, as part of using the Charlotte Mason approach, you can show her where China is on the map. You can show her where the Yangtze River is. You can talk about the clothing that they wore, the shape of the boats. They've got, I think there's rice cakes in here too. And you can talk about why ducks were so important to them, all out of a very simple literature book. Now the illustrations in here are not complex at all, and it's reminiscent of the time when this was published, which was, if I can find the publishing information in this, 1933. I still believe that the very best books for children and for adults are all the older books. The wording that they use is often slightly more complex, even though it's simple. It expects a lot of the child. The bar is raised quite high. And many times you're actually reading history at the same time. So that's another subject that you're putting into it. But remember, from the Charlotte Mason approach, you're not actually dividing subjects into writing, spelling, geography, history, cultural studies, and whatever else you're getting out of here. It's just simply using the Charlotte Mason approach to teach the language arts, all of which conveniently have individual little names, because within the outside schooling and educational system, it's just simply an easier way to record things. And sometimes you have to use that language in order to get other people to understand what you're talking about, especially, for instance, if you somebody from the Education Review Office has come to inspect your work. You're going to have to talk to them in the language that they understand when it comes to education. Right then is not the time to try and impress to them how your method of education may do a better job than the one they've got. All right, now, so we're dealing with ping. And incidentally, ping is a very, very easy word to sound out when you're learning phonics. So all the way through the book. Okay, so when you're reading the book to the child as her literature book, just read the book, because what you're doing has a different purpose. You are reading her a story. Later on, because she'll want to hear the story over and over, young ones usually do, but later on, then you can go back and use sections of the story as your teaching opportunities, if you like. So you'll be able to find on a page, show me the word that starts with P. P says P, P for ping. Now, for a young child, there's actually a lot of words. So just concentrate on a page that has fewer words and maybe help her find, there it is, ping. Unfortunately, it's got that funny squiggly G. The other interesting thing about these books written in the older days is that when they expected the child to be learning how to read by phonics, the illustrations in the book are not necessarily there to give clues to what the wording is at the bottom. I've heard modern teachers, when the child is struggling to identify the written words, look at the picture. What clue does it give you as to what words are there? And then the child is expected to guess what these words might say according to what the picture is. So it's not the purpose of why some of these books were written. There's no way from that picture that the child is going to be able to guess what some of these words might be down here. She actually does need to know how to read. So going from ping, and I'm going to go into the books where she wrote about this. Now it's just a boring old stationery book from the shop, and it's got one side blank and the other page has the lines on it. Glue the two intermittent pages together. And the reason for that is that you don't want, because a child prints heavily and the colours that they're going to draw on are going to go through the pictures very easily. It also strengthens the pages between each one. Now here is Janie's narration about ping. The date there, it's the 14th of February 2005. Now, I had a great idea then, and I suggest you do too. You see what I've done here? I've actually written her age. So from now on, you don't have to figure out from the date you've got written and how old she actually is, because you can see it. Good indication of what's going on, and you can then compare how her progress is very easily, just simply by turning a page and finding the next part of her work. And children, being the honest, transparent little cherubs that they are, you can see very clearly, are they understanding this story? Is it above them? Is it too simple for them? Or are they just simply not interested? And I've got an example of both of that here. But going back to ping, there's her illustration there. And when you compare that with the book, where is it? You can see it's very similar to the drawing in there. Here. I don't know why she chose that page out of all of the others, because I would not have told her you've got to illustrate from this page. She had to illustrate this according to how she remembered it and what part of the story was actually on her mind at the time. So the narration that you're doing with a young child is very much driven from what they've heard, how they've understood it, and how they're telling it back out again. That is the most superior way that I've ever heard of for trying to ascertain what your child has learned, what means the most to her, and where the gaps are in her understanding, that you can just pop away and maybe think about that for another time. So that's the picture that she did. Now going back to here, I got a lot here actually done of the different methodologies that I explained to you of the language arts, the parts of your English work that you're going to teach. So you can see here that I've written out for her at a level that I knew she was capable of. The bird is diving by ping. Is that right? The bird is diving by ping. Okay, the bird is diving must have been close by ping, next to ping. And maybe she chose that line herself. No, that isn't even in the story. I'm just thinking back. That would have been something that she remembered from the story regarding this page. There it is. Can you see the bird is diving by ping, close by ping? So I wrote these words out for her. Notice that I've done what I showed you with the phonics book just there. The capital letter all the way to the top. The H, the spine, the stick, the back, whatever you call it, all the way to the top, and then up and over and down like a waterfall. Quite deliberate. Same thing with a B and a D. Diving, and then of course the G with the tail, the monkey's tail, goes down and underneath the lines. And now notice her efforts to copy this. You can see from her understanding of what she was doing at the time, she got her T to the top, she did her H. The E, she's concentrating more on the shape. That's actually a reasonably difficult shape to make. So the shape's pretty good, but it's not, look at 6, I'm not even thinking about how right or wrong is this. This is all practice and guidance for her. The bird, okay, she's got her B and her D around the right way, and the R is also good. You'll also note, very, very common amongst the little ones, when they do the dot on the I, they always kind of like do a little circle and colour it all in, because that's what looks correct to them. And what's she got here? By. Okay, so she's got a real floater going there. She's copied them correctly, but she has not yet understood that the bottom of the Y needs to sit on the ground next to the bottom of that B. That's okay. Notice that I have not got her to do that again. I am really satisfied, because for a young child to even hold a pencil like that and copy those letters is a lot of work. As mentioned before, you have now got a very clear understanding of how she's getting on. It's legible, and she's done a really good job in copying the shape. She will get better at letter placement later on. Now her narration, clearly that is my writing, not hers. You can see that it is scribble. It's not my best writing either. That's because Janie was very young then, I got her to do an oral narration, because she simply at this age and experience does not have all of the skill and the experience to be able to get out the words that she wants to say and get them down on paper. It would have taken her a month of Sundays and no end of frustration to make her do that herself. Just not worth it. Get what's out here down onto the paper by doing an oral narration yourself. And I also mentioned in the audio part of the podcast, when you're doing an oral narration, write it down verbatim. Don't change a thing. Also because, importantly, when you look back on that, that is going to give you a precise guide as to what her understanding and her comprehension was, where her grammar is going to be needing to be improved. It's just an accurate reflection of what she was actually doing at the time. If I corrected her pronunciation there, it wouldn't actually be accurate. In other words, it's not the truth. And you need to record the truth of your children's education, what's going on. So I'm going to read you a little bit here, because this is how she has heard the story, and now I've said to her, I want you to tell me back what you remember about the story. I don't give her any hints, and because she's already done a little bit of oral narration up until now and she's used to it, I didn't have to teach her how to do it. You might have to teach a child who is, say, fresh out of public school and they've never done this kind of thing before. But for Janie, she starts with, Ping lived in a boat with 42 cousins, grandma and uncle, mother and father, Nana and granddad and Ping. One day Ping was just upside in the water in the river when something called, but he didn't hear because he was upside down trying to catch fish. He didn't want to be last because they get smacked. He hided in a little bush type of thing. When he was asleep, the boat was gone, and he got out and looked for the boat he lived in. Soon he saw a boat with lots of black birds in it, and they were flying right close to him and nearly hitting him over. And in brackets I've written down because she said, I can't wait to write so fast. She must have been watching me write flat out as she was talking. They were catching fish. Saw a boat with breadcrumbs on the water making a little line. Suddenly a boy came down and got Ping, brang him on the boat. Soon he knocked over the basket and got Ping out and put him on the edge of the boat, suddenly slipped off the edge of the boat and quickly swam away. Obviously you've heard those words that were grammatically incorrect. There is no such word as brang, but to a 6-year-old, brang just sounds like the past tense of bring. She'll learn later that it was brung. I did not stop and correct that. I have not corrected that in her oral narration. The purpose of getting this oral narration down was to get her comprehension. That was the purpose of this. So don't let the little bits and pieces here that aren't quite right trip you up to the intention and the purpose of what you're trying to do here. Now, I can be somewhat of a perfectionist, so for me to not do that, I've had to learn that over the years of not correcting every single thing that comes out. There is a time and a place for me to do that. That was not the right day. He hided in a little bush. See, if I'd stopped to correct that with her, I would have completely interrupted her train of thinking of her telling me what her version of the story was. Just for trying to correct something between hid and hided? No, not worth it. So we've done several things with this one, and that's not an everyday thing either. This would probably have been, I would have chosen one day that I needed to see where she was at. Maybe we hadn't done an oral narration for a while. Maybe she was just in a really good cooperative mood that day because everything flows. She wanted to do that, and that would have taken up a large chunk. So probably for the rest of that week, I just wouldn't have insisted on so much for her. For the rest of the week, she would have had her reading phonics. She would have done a little bit more writing practice. And that's probably it. That's given me a really good indication. Now, no, there's something I wanted to show you here. So a couple of months later, this is in May the same year, I have read Alice in Wonderland to her. Sometimes you think your child is really going to enjoy something. No. Alice in Wonderland. So I've done an oral narration here, and it's in, she did it because she just simply had to do it. I required it of her, and she knew that. There was no fight about this. The Mock Turtle sang songs. They went to a mad tea party. The first time her mother was reading her a book, and sometimes she was with the Queen. The baby turns into a pig. She had a fight with a rabbit and a pig. And I can remember having to work to get that out of her, like, what else do you remember, Janie? So clearly it just didn't, she wasn't interested. So I wrote my reflections in this, and this again is a really, really good idea. I regularly did this in the kids' writing books. I would write down how I felt they'd done on the day, what I felt their strengths and their weaknesses were, my general feedback, if you like, as any teacher would. But you're doing it with more intent because you're their mother as well, and you are wanting to keep a good record of what they're doing because you are going to rejoice, really. It's not an over word to use. It's not a dramatic word to use. You're going to rejoice when you see how your children develop naturally, and all you did was give them what they needed and they came with you on it. So here's my comments after that day. Okay, so this wasn't a very good book for Janie. I knew she wasn't very interested, but that's pathetic. I guess I should read books to her about animals because that's what she's really interested in. As a contrast, I'll get her to narrate about Opo, the friendly dolphin. So I knew that her learning portal, if you like. Janie has always been interested in animals right from the beginning. She's now got a BA in zoology, so she's actually ended up doing exactly what she was always very, very good at and knew the best. And this picture, I've said, I got her to do a picture to illustrate the book. For the little ones, an illustration is a very good idea to get them to show you what they're understanding. It was a very boring picture of Alice. This picture illustrates her disinterest. While she was happy to draw a picture of Alice, her choice, it was clearly only because it was required of her. So, although we had a very relaxed Charlotte Mason approach to homeschooling, I was still in charge of what they did or did not do, with a reasonable amount of flexibility. She did not have the choice that day of giving me an oral narration or to draw a picture that told something about the book. That was required of her. I didn't say, do you want to draw me a picture? She just did. But I've got a very clear indication now that helps me form a direction in which to go. Again, the Charlotte Mason approach encourages you to find what your child is naturally interested in, because that's what's going to make their minds and their intellect just blossom. So for me to go on and insist that she would have done that, just for the insistence that damn it, she was going to do it because I said so, it's just not the right attitude to take. It's not going to be a very good outcome educationally. So I said as a contrast, I was going to get her to write about Opo, the friendly dolphin. Opo is a New Zealand story about a dolphin who would come in and play with the children, I think back maybe in the 1950s. So you won't find it in your libraries unless you're in New Zealand. So here you can see there's more detail. She's taken her time, and it's clearly got to do something about the story. She chose not to use colours that day. Doesn't matter. And Opo is obviously a happy dolphin. Now, I have written it down, and all of this is her ideas. They are not bullet points. This is flowing. Let's see what she says. Opo hit a shark and saved his friend. When he was back on the ship, he chucked some fish. He was on the news to tell what Opo did, and everyone came to see her. She was very happy, and she played with the ball, and sometimes she wanted to drown it. Whenever it falled, she went back in the water to be under it to hit it when it's back down. She plays with Captain Jack and the others, and when she wanted to hit the ball, she sometimes didn't because the kids sometimes were too close. And then my finishing sentence, that's all she remembers. But you can see from that the impact that the story has made on her. That's what you're looking for. When you get that out of books that you're reading with your children, no matter what age, that's your gold standard. That's probably really all I need to show you. I don't even know what date this is, but this was after a trip to Wanganui, which is my husband's hometown. You can see she obviously still has not mastered the skill of being able to form her letters in the right place, but she is forming her letters correctly, and she is getting down the words that she needs to get down in order to tell me and herself what she needed to say. If I had stopped and insisted that she got all that right and rewrite it till she got it right again, I am just making her hate the language arts, the joy and the beauty of the written word. I don't want to do that to a child. And there's her absolutely delight. And the other thing is that these are just so stinking cute to look back on when they're older. See that one there? So that's her, me. And she's got David, her older brother, who is going, ha! I don't know what he would have done, but that would be typical for the time. And I'm not sure what that animal is. Anyway, it's absolutely wonderful to look back on these things, and you have wonderful records of your children. Now, book log. Go and buy a beautiful hardbacked book, because a book log they're going to use for a long time. Let me just show you how she gets started. So in the beginning, the books that she was reading with me, they're the early readers. You can see I've got the year down here, and I've written these books in. Little bit by little bit, as she is able to, she is starting to write these books in. I do not care what colour her pen or pencil is, obviously, because the point is, get it written in. And again, this becomes a record of you watching her progress as she is improving on her letter formation skills. And she's gone and done some here that she must have read The Wizard of Oz, because she's got the Tin Woodman, the Scarecrow, the Lion, and I don't know what that one is up there. It doesn't really matter. Just letting your child have the freedom and flexibility to be able to do this. Okay, it wasn't her narration book. This is her book log. I don't care, because this is a wonderful record of what she was reading at the time and how it impacted her. Now over the page, and so you've got the year in the margin, and just write in the month. You don't need a start finish date. Look, as the years go by, it just doesn't matter what day of the month it was that she started or whatever. Now on this page here, she's writing all by herself. And even by the end of the page there, you can see that she's starting to get a more consistent formation of letters. She's still illustrating things and getting a little bit distracted. But I can also tell you that as the children would find these books as the years went by and go back and read them, they loved looking at them themselves. And it's literally a book list. So that, let's say you did this, say, with your oldest child, and a few years down you've got your younger child coming through. You've actually got yourself a ready-made book reading list here. So it holds several purposes. It's also a really impressive record to get out and give to anyone who's coming to give you an educational inspection, whether you've got to submit what your child has done, well, in which case you just photocopy it. But if in our time we had the review officers come and visit us, and over I think 15 years we had 2 reviews in that time. And then in the latter years of our homeschooling, the education department stopped doing ERO reviews, because they were finding it to be a waste of money and time for the education department. But that's impressive. If you're showing someone what your child is doing and how much they've read and when, instant record. So it holds several purposes. It's obviously a pragmatic book list. It's a record of what she's done over the years. It's a record of the progress that she's making with her written abilities. What else can I say? It's just, again, a brilliant, easy way. You're doing language arts simply by doing the everyday thing. So the end result is that you're doing language arts, okay? But the way you're doing it, it's just the end result. You're doing it by completely different ways. You've got the book log, you have got the narration book, and you've got, what have I got over here? Another one, which was another book of, this is actually, I'll show you that in a minute. So you end up with the same result. Whether you choose curriculum style to go handwriting, spelling, creative story, poetry, whatever, and then you are teaching language arts, or it's more the Charlotte Mason approach. You are teaching language arts incidentally because you are working with a good book that will just simply naturally do it. I think you end up, my personal opinion and experience over the years is that I will end up with a more superior experience if I have allowed the child to learn her language arts, since that's the topic of this podcast, through very, very good books. If I had insisted, for instance, that we were going to study Alice in Wonderland for the whole term, I would never have had the result from her by the end of that term. Okay, she would have been compliant and done it, but when you think of what else they could have learnt, done, enjoyed and taken pleasure out of, I don't have to explain that anymore. You can see why I just came over the years to have full confidence in the Charlotte Mason approach. It works. Now here is an example, and I must have been feeling particularly organised and very pleased with myself, that for Janie, when she was term 3, 2006, so she would have been like 6, just turned 6, I think. That was her plan for the term. That's all you need. You don't need a lot of detail. This is your springboard on which to go. I already knew by this stage how much she was actually capable of reading. And I would be using, in this case, The Donkey's Egg, and you won't remember it, but in her book log, that was one of the first books I've got written in the top of her book log. And I wrote it in there because that was in the early days before she could write well enough to put it in. Or maybe she had done enough work in writing something else that I didn't require her to write that in that day. So she's got her maths books there that I was working from there for her, and a guideline as to what we were looking for. And you see I've got a little note here. Check HBJ. That was a maths curriculum that we were interested at the time, and I must have been looking to change over at the time for her. Reading The Donkey's Egg, then Stars in the Sky, and then I've got a couple more ones here. Now they would not have been my only books for her, because in our house, as it probably is in yours, you've got a bookshelf crammed of books. And when she's run out of a book or she's looking for another one, you either send her to the bookshelf or you just grab off a handful of, let's say, the animal books, because that's what she's really interested in, and give her a choice. I had writing. Well, there it is. How's that for a plan? Writing. Whatever is relevant. And I've got down here, practice the letter size T and H especially. And you can see that I was pointing those out in her written things there. She was still trying to nail how to get those letters formed correctly. And science. Anything. Oh, gosh. Science. KCC is the Kiwi Conservation Club, which was a magazine that I think was released monthly about what was going on in New Zealand science-wise for children. Anything about insects or animals, because that was her learning portal for virtually everything. And that, oh no, I have got one more thing I wanted to show you. I referred to beautiful books when I said that buying living books is actually cheaper than buying curricula, even though beautiful books. Now this is what I mean by a beautiful book. It's a hardback. It's got all of the collection of My Naughty Little Sister in there. It's covered in good plastic, because this book here is an investment that's going to last years on the bookshelf, and now I'm reading it to my granddaughter. That's the way you have to look at beautiful books. I also bought the cheap little paperbacks, you know, like this, of all the different My Naughty Little Sister ones, and it really didn't matter what condition they were in. A child does not take this book to bed. It is read on a flat surface, like a floor or the table, because the spine will become damaged otherwise. Now, another example that I've pulled out of my bookshop, and this one is a tome, The Complete Works of Winnie the Pooh. Again, it is what is just called a beautiful book in terms of my Charlotte Mason approach. And you can get all of the paperbacks as well. And in the paperbacks, you can let them colour in the pictures and things too in their little. It really doesn't matter. I hope giving you the examples of some of what was the nitty-gritty of how we did our day has been helpful. I don't want you to think for a minute that every day was turning out amazing work. It wasn't. There were some days when, say, not very much got done. But overall, you're the best gauge of what your child is capable of and at the time. And it's your absolute privilege to see how they're developing and learning over the years. Any questions? Please let me know, and I'll see you next week.